File item 16, pass and retain. File item number 17, AB 67. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 67 by Assemblymember Gonzalez and others, enacting link to employment.
Ms. Gonzalez, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, once again, I am back to try to convince you that workers who are forced to work or possibly lose their job on Thanksgiving should at least be compensated at the industry standard. Last year I brought this bill up and I spoke to a lot of you who are unwilling to support it. You had reasons. It was too broad. It contained too many people. Everybody agreed that what's happened in the retail industry with stores opening up at 6 a.m. on Thanksgiving, 3 p.m. on Thanksgiving, 5 p.m. on Thanksgiving, everybody I spoke to agreed that they were bothered by that. But they told me my bill was too broad. So this year I brought it back. It only affects companies in California that have over 500 workers. Those are large businesses. Businesses that make a lot of profit and make a decision because they're making that profit on Thanksgiving to open it up. It only pertains to grocery and retail workers. It's still double time. And some of you have asked me why, and I'll explain. The standard in the industry for over half a century has been double time. Grocery traditionally have decided whether or not to open up, and those that did open up paid at least double time. In my region, they get triple time. This is not something new. It is what has been accepted. It is a tradition, just like Thanksgiving, so that those people who had to go into work or who chose to because this was being offered could be compensated and wouldn't just be left with the option of either not losing their job or being away from their family. When retailers started opening up on Thanksgiving as well, it just makes sense for them to also reach the industry standard. Today, in the industry, in the grocery industry, if you're talking about stores with over 500 people, there's still 70% of the industry already provides for this. We're talking about actors who are new in the system who don't want to provide the industry standard. We can start by changing that. Last year, I told you a story about a woman who testified in committee. Her name was Julie. She works in the Bay Area. And on Thanksgiving, she told us she had to be at work at 3 p.m. But the problem was she relies on public transportation. So to get to work, she actually had to call a cab or Uber. And when she was off work, she had to do the same. Public transportation wasn't running on Thanksgiving. So in effect, she had to pay to go to work and not lose her job. She had to pay to not have family dinner just to not lose her job on this day. There are some traditions that are worth fighting for. There are some standards that we should preserve and codify in law, and I'd say this is one of them. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Mr. Harper, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This bill, as I argued last year, is still bad for business and it's bad for consumers. I realize that this bill has been narrowly tailored at this time, but it's still a narrowly tailored bad bill. And I understand that it's really easy to make a big target out of big business, thinking that they may make profits, etc., but not all large businesses and not all large grocery stores do every year. And so this is just another way to be able to try to take it to those kinds of businesses that honestly are trying to make it so that families can be able to have access to food and groceries that they may have forgotten the previous day or earlier in the week to be able to provide for their families Thanksgiving dinner. And all this does is seeks to penalize them for being able to make that availability happen for normal, everyday Californians. Additionally, I believe that this is incrementalism to expand this back to the original side of the bill and just try to get the camel's nose under the tent. But the bottom line is, in this chamber, we have 79 members who are not grocery store managers. Let's stop trying to do other people's jobs. We are legislators. And let's get out of the business of making everyday management decisions of people that are just trying to run a business and trying to get groceries to people, especially on Thanksgiving Day. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Wagner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm also going to rise in opposition to this bill. We've dealt with this issue several times before. I remember a few years ago, AB 880 from my friend from L.A. was also targeting just the big businesses, and we heard some of the same arguments there that we just heard from the author here. Look, these are just big businesses. What do we care? Of course they can afford it. They've got 500 employees. Of course they can afford to do this. Well, actually, there is, with this bill, and with that argument, absolutely no economic analysis that tells us that that is in fact true. Merely because you have 500 or 600 or 1,000 employees, you can't automatically afford everything this legislature decides it's going to dump on you. And maybe there are lots of businesses that have 499 employees that could afford this better than somebody else. We don't know because we haven't seen that analysis. We've merely said big is bad and big is 500, and therefore we are going to dump again on folks like Walmart, folks like these grocery stores, folks that, as my friend from Huntington Beach said, provide great value to the communities in which they're located and which they serve. Value that gets undermined by a bill like this that forces, again, with zero analysis as to whether it could be afforded or not, zero analysis as to what it'll do to the prices, zero analysis as what it will do to the hours that these stores might be available. And we will find those stores less able to serve their communities because they will have to raise their prices, or because they will have to adjust their operating hours, or maybe worse, they will have to fire enough employees to get under the 500 target. One of the most dangerous jobs in this state, dangerous because you're going to lose it real soon, is to be the 500th employee. We should be encouraging employment. We should be encouraging growth. We should be encouraging these establishments, if they're able, to provide value, to grow and provide more of that value. And this is an artificial, entirely unsupported, further effort to restrain their growth, hurts the communities they serve, hurts the workers that purportedly we're trying to help, and comes to us with zero economic analysis and zero common sense behind it. Vote no, please.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Ms. Bonilla, you are recognized.
I rise in strong support of this measure. Speaking on behalf of predominantly the women workers who have these jobs in retail and in the grocery industry. And let's refocus and turn off the fire alarm and realize that we're talking here about Thanksgiving Day. We're talking about a day where traditionally in our country we have placed an incredibly high value on the ability to gather with your family, to celebrate with your family, and for women primarily who are affected by this to be able to be home with their family, or to be fairly compensated if the business makes the financial decision after great analysis to open. We're not in any way saying that they have to open, that they have to lose money. All of these claims that are so worrisome to these very large businesses, I think, have no foundation in reality at all. They didn't open a few years ago. I don't know why they feel they have to open now. And if they do open, they are now going to be able to open with the full knowledge and full reality of their full financial analysis of whether or not they can pay double time in this very restricted and limited bill. I strongly urge your support. This is a bill that supports family values. This is a bill that supports working women. This is a bill, when we talk about those who are struggling in poverty, where we say, you know what, we're not going to put one more burden on you just because you're poor, just because you're working in retail or the grocery industry without union representation. We're going to say, you know what, as a legislative body, we value you, we want to support you, and you are worth double time. I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Mr. Gatto, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to address the comments of the two gentlemen from Orange County. First of all, the gentleman from Huntington Beach. You know, it's the core power of the states. This is in all 50 constitutions of all 50 states, and it's in ours. And it says that the core power of the states is to regulate the behavior and enforce order within our territory for the betterment of the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of our inhabitants. None of us are guys who lay streets down. None of us are people who, very few of us are people who are doctors or in healthcare, but we regulate all these things. And the people elected us to make a moral and to make ethical decisions on behalf of our voters. And that's what this bill is. It's making a decision whether it's right to force people to work on a holiday without compensating them for it. To the gentleman from Irvine who asked about a financial analysis, this bill represents 0.004% of the annual payroll costs of any business. 0.0004% of any annual payroll costs. I think that's a small price to pay for compensating people for having to work on a holiday, and I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Gomez, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker and members, I rise in support of AB 67. Being elected to the Assembly is it often feels a world and a lifetime away from where I started and probably most of you started. I grew up in Riverside, California, in a very red part of the state back in the 1990s, and I actually worked numerous minimum wage jobs. No plan on going to college. I actually worked not a 9-to-5 schedule. I worked from 5 in the afternoon to 9 the next day, first at a Subway, and then after that at a Target from midnight to 9 in the morning stocking. And I was making, I think, $5.10 an hour, a little bit above minimum wage. And we didn't get the kind of benefits that I saw other people getting. It was one of the main motivating factors of why I decided to go to a community college and try to change my life. But we often forget that people do struggle on minimum wage. I had a job where it was a temporary job, but it was within a union shop of a grocery store, and we got double pay on any holiday. And it was amazing, because double pay when you're making minimum wage is huge. It makes a big difference on what you take home. It makes a big difference on what you can pay, but it also makes a big difference that you know that you're going to be away from your friends and family on a holiday that everybody's enjoying except you. So, should it be limited to companies 500 or more? I actually think it probably should be broadened to include any company over 25 employees. And I know that one didn't get off the floor. So this is a compromise. You can't have it both ways, where you say it's not for everybody, but then we want you to limit it to 500, but then you're saying we're singling out people. I know this is, everybody comes from different places and different perspectives, but my perspective is if you're making a minimum wage and you're taking time away from your family, you should be compensated for it. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. Mr. Gray, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise in support of this bill. As many of you are aware, in the past I've had concerns and still have some concerns I've discussed with the author, but at its core, this is about making sure those who don't have an economic choice on Thanksgiving, who have to work for their families, to make sure that they're compensated. A practice, frankly, that's very common amongst most employers in this state. The bill still has a couple of tweaks I think we could work on. It's substantially better, in my opinion, than what we had before us last year. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and support the author today moving this issue forward.
Mr. Thurmond, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 67. You know, I'd like to encourage my colleagues who have concerns to think of it differently. We often talk about the rewards of work. This is an opportunity for us to reward those who do the work on a day that we have largely defined in this society and in this country as a day for being with family. I would also say that the measure is very reasonably crafted to protect small business. And I think by any definition that one might raise, 500 employees would exceed what one might define as a small business. Further, in the way it's crafted, it is exempting people who are executives or those who would be exempt from earning overtime pay. So the bill has gone far to create protections. At the end of the day, I think at its premise, it's saying if you are going to earn a lot on the day of Thanksgiving through Black Friday sales and others, why not invest some of that same money in the people who helped you to earn that money on that day? And for those reasons, I'd urge your support of AB 67.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. Dr. Wood, you are recognized.
Yes, I too rise in support of AB 67. I'm actually encouraged by the number of colleagues who are now rising to support it as well. And so I'm glad that the author brought it back and appreciate the amendment to restrict this to larger companies. This happens to be personally my favorite holiday. For me, it's about family and about food, an opportunity to get together. And if an employer, a large employer, makes the financial decision, and by the way, I don't believe it's our role to have to do a financial analysis on that. If you're a big employer and you're making a financial decision that says, you know what, we're going to make a lot of money on Thanksgiving Day, and therefore we're going to open up, then you ought to be sharing that with your employees. You want your employees to come to work with a big smile on their face, pay them double time, or close your business for that. There's no requirement that the company of 500 has to open up on Thanksgiving Day. Close the business, give everybody a holiday, make everybody happy, and you'll have a lot happier people come Black Friday. Thank you.
Ms. Grove, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't even going to speak on the bill until some of the comments that were made because, you know, Thanksgiving is a day that should be valued. I think that we rush into holidays. You're selling Christmas stuff, something to celebrate Christ. You're celebrating that and having purchases in stores in October that has Christmas stuff already on sale. And so I think that taking a pause for Thanksgiving Day is a good idea. I don't support the legislation, and for several reasons. As a business owner, you know, I personally take objection to my colleague from the Pasadena area, who I deeply respect on the floor, but, you know, he goes, it's 0.004%. And it just might be 0.004%. But what you guys tend to forget at this body is that there's 1.45% for FICA, there's 6.2 for Medicare, there's 6.9 for unemployment insurance, there's 6.5 for the federal unemployment insurance. There's an additional 1.5% tax at the end of the year because this body has been so irresponsible with its financial decisions that it failed to pay the federal government back its unemployment borrowing money that they borrowed from the federal government, and it's passed on to employers. So this year, every employer that is represented by every person in this body will pay an additional $65,000 up to $200,000 extra just because we failed to pay our unemployment bill to the federal government. And now the federal government is coming after employers as individuals to take care of that. When you add 7.0% to 8% for workers' comp insurance, 10% for health care, 4% for liability insurance, 15%. Then you have a breathing tax from the Environmental Health and Toxins Department, where if you have over so many employees, you have to pay for having a copy machine and toner in your office, which equates to my company about $12,000 a year. It's all of these things that add up. So I get that it's just 0.004%, but when you throw everything in that we as California business owners pay in this state, you're up to almost 48% of the wages. So I get why people are being laid off. I get my business closed down 3 offices and laid off 31 employees. My colleague that's from Los Angeles, again, came down to visit my business. He gets it. It's just crazy that you continue to incrementally, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts for businesses in the state of California. We're labeled the litigation hellhole. That's what our label has been for 5 years because we don't address PAGA issues. We don't address these frivolous attorneys that come and just sue over stupid things. My colleague that's getting ready to speak addressed one particular bill last year that made a small dent, but it doesn't fix it. So I sympathize with the author's intent to sanctify or to set aside Thanksgiving Day. I do. I understand that there are a lot of low-income employees that are required to work on that day. But you have to think that that low-income employee isn't costing that employer $10 an hour. That employer is paying anywhere from $16 to $18 an hour just to provide that person a job. And I think it's about time we stop punishing job creators.
Mr. Hernandez, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, members, I rise in strong support of Assembly Bill 67. I know that our colleague has worked very closely with those of us here on this sacred floor to address the concerns of so many of us that weren't quite ready to be there. I was not one of them. I was very much there from day one. I do appreciate the notion that we as California lawmakers ought to be concerned with the quality of life of our constituents, and that it is our business to be concerned with the safety, health, and welfare of our constituents. That is our job. I don't know if anyone here disagrees with that notion, but I do disagree with the notion and characterization by the gentleman, respectfully, the gentleman from Orange County, that suggested that we ought not to be engaged in this process. Business comes to California and to our core urban sectors because there is money to be made. And they have encroached and they're opening the doors during the holidays because there's money to be made during the time of family togetherness, during days that we consider hallowed days, days that we come together as families. So therefore, there is an opportunity to share in that profiteering that happens because it comes at a price. It comes at a price that affects our homes directly. There is no problem for these businesses to open up the door and share a little bit if they're going to separate families from this day we call the Day of Thanks, the Day of Thanksgiving. We know that there are too many, and as labor chairman, I know that there's too many of our communities and members of our communities that find themselves having to work multiple part-time jobs. Quality of life for the working man and woman in California is not improving. It's getting tougher. It's getting worse. This is where we stand up and say, how do we curb that train and back to the direction where folks are able to have sustainability in their household, where they're not afraid to say, I'm sorry, I can't work on this holiday because it's special to my family. Too many of these workers work this day, not because they want to, but because they're afraid that if they say no, that they won't have a job waiting for them pursuing or following the holidays. And that's unfortunate. Too many of our workers are saying yes because they feel fearful, because too many of our workers are now finding themselves in the world of the temp worker status. So this bill is about standing up for our families, those working folks that are now being separated from their families. This bill is about us saying, constituents, those of you that send us to represent us, we're going to do something about it, and we're going to stand up and take your side. I think that's what we're here to do. I applaud the author for doing just that. We ought to protect our communities, and this is a great way to get started and send a message. We need balance in our communities. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Cooley, you are recognized.
Well, colleagues, I'm mostly standing up because I see myself as a no vote on this bill, and I've shared that with my colleague from San Diego. And so I just wanted to, our preeminent job in fashioning laws to pass just laws, which is what our motto before us says, is laws of uniform application. This is an interesting issue for me because I'm not sure what the right solution is for these workers, but I'm fairly sure that not a lot of you have done what I've done within the last 60 days, which is to go out between 1 and 3 in the morning, visit bars in my district on a national holiday evening, the hookah bar on Sunrise Avenue, the persons staffing the hotels in Rancho Cordova. We have a lot of hotels, the gas station operators. They're the 24-hour veterinary hospitals. I have gone out, not Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, just to connect with people in my district working in those hours. And it's sort of funny. I didn't do it by myself. I had a 87-year-old lady who was going to Sharon's Lounge in Rancho Cordova, and she was a major hit. But I just recognized that our economy is filled with people. I stood there watching a lady who was in the veterinary hospital because her pet had a crisis on Christmas Eve. And so she's there as the doctors and others are trying to take care of her animal. So I just am mindful that there is a wide array of people in the workplace. I know personally the astonishing array of businesses that are open all night, every night of the year. And so I understand that my colleague is working to try to find a breakthrough and has narrowed the bill. This is a description of a Christmas Eve, but I know it is the same on Thanksgiving, which she has narrowed it to. And so I'm just the voice sort of saying, ultimately, I do think justice, working conditions is a vital conversation, but there's lots of people out there that are in this space, and we need to struggle with how we have, whatever the rule we have, it should be fair across the board. So I mostly just I'm not a knee-jerk on the issue. I've thought a lot about it. I connect it to my own life, as I say, within the last 60 days, and I just thank you for the opportunity to speak to your measure.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Mr. Jones, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to rise in agreement with some of the arguments in support of the bill from our colleague from Los Angeles and our colleague from Healdsburg. They raised some very serious points in supporting the bill, but I think their arguments actually argue against the bill. One of the points raised by our colleague from Los Angeles was he had a minimum wage job at one point in time, or started off as a minimum wage job, as I think a lot of us have had minimum wage jobs when we were in high school and college, and he didn't like it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't like my minimum wage job either. And just like our colleague from Los Angeles, I also went to community college. I also got degrees. I also worked harder and did more and made myself more valuable so that I didn't have to work a minimum wage job my entire life. As our colleague in Los Angeles, I also worked my way, as many of us have, into better jobs. And I think we can all agree that our colleague from Los Angeles and myself and many of us on this floor have done fairly well in doing that. Our colleague from Los Angeles also said that he had a union job and that he appreciated double pay on some of the holidays that he was paid for. Well, I've never had a union job, but my father's had a union job. Two of my grandfathers have had union jobs. My own son, most recently, has had a union job and has been a Teamster. Let's look at the history of union jobs in California over the last 20 years. And how many of those union jobs have left California because the pressure put on those businesses by this legislature, they could not withstand anymore. They could handle the labor negotiations with the union, but when the legislature stepped in and put additional pressures on them, they couldn't handle it anymore and had to move several good-paying, middle-class union jobs, manufacturing jobs, from California to other states in the country or overseas. How many of these good union-paying jobs just don't exist anymore because the companies went bankrupt? And let's give one point an example nationally, Wonder Bread and Hostess Cakes, who at one point in time in America was still is one of America's most recognized brands, but was also one of America's best recognized union jobs in America. 18,000 middle-class, well-paying, hard-working Americans. 18,000. Bakers, unionized Teamsters that drove the trucks, unionized grocery store workers that stocked the shelves, that under the pressure of the legislature and under the pressure of labor negotiations had to declare bankruptcy. And now, because of the brilliant minds that bought that brand and have resurrected it, the best comeback in the history of ever, now direct market to the grocery stores and direct market to the convenience stores, and have eliminated 18,000 good-paying union jobs. And then to the point of our colleague from Healdsburg, and I loved it. I didn't even think about this until he mentioned it. There's no requirement for these businesses to open up on Thanksgiving Day. And that is true. So now instead of having a company that employs 500 people on Thanksgiving Day, might make that decision to not open at all. And now this legislature has inserted itself into the relationship, the legal, righteous relationship between an employer and an employee, to the point where the employer has to make the financial decision to close down on that day, and now 500 people are left without the opportunity to make the choice that day to go to work or not go to work.
30 seconds, Mr. Jones.
So for those reasons submitted by our colleagues earlier, I urge a no vote.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mr. Ridley Thomas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question of the author.
Without objection.
My colleague from San Diego, does this bill not apply most directly, or at least its intent, to the retail sector?
It only applies to the retail sector.
Thank you for answering the question. On my time, Mr. Speaker, for those of you who are young or young at heart, appreciate that bills like these and measures that we take as a legislature impact those who need it most right now. Because when people my age, you all know that I'm 28 years old, but when people my age attempt to access the economy, it's not the same as when some folks who are my parents' age attempted to access the economy. When my dad graduated from high school, he got a Teamster's job and a union card at a box cutting factory in the city of Vernon, an industrial city that many of you are aware of. Those jobs are not accessible by people who graduate from high school. You have to go to trade school. You have to be in an apprenticeship program. You have to have other jobs to supplement your income. We see people who work 2.5 jobs for most of the year just to make ends meet, and maybe pick up another shift or a third job just to make sure that they can abide themselves through the holiday period, cash crunches and the like. We see a great deal of economic pressure and we say income inequality, but it's not being able to keep up with the cost of living for those entry wage jobs. In areas all across the district that I represent, people who have children and grandchildren cannot afford to buy into those neighborhoods, and it's changing the character of neighborhoods, and it's not allowing for the continued economic growth that we would hope to see. So bills like this help right some of that. They help raise the issue. They help people understand that this legislature, the state of California, can do something to help stand into the breach, and the market will adjust, because we want to. This is a benefit. This will be a benefit to those workers in the retail sector, and this benefit is likely, if adopted by this legislature and signed by the governor, to become widespread. And what a wonderful thing to honor the dignity of labor with appropriate pay on special occasions like holidays, where you have to go away from your family to help make ends meet. So I would strongly encourage those who are considering this bill to support it. And I thank the author for standing up for young folks, for working families, for single parents who are most impacted by bills such as this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley Thomas. Mr. Stone, you are recognized.
Thank you. Members, let's stay on point with the bill. Much of the testimony here that we've heard really isn't talking about this bill. What is this bill talking about? Thanksgiving Day and retailers. And I have had this conversation in my district with a lot of retailers who do open on Thanksgiving Day. And why? Their most profitable day of the year. Most of the small businesses that I talk to actually pay double time because they understand the imposition. And while I tend to disagree with the amendments that were taken, respectfully, with the author, because I believe it's going in the wrong way, it tends to be the largest companies in this state that are not honoring the structure, the fabric of the community, because they're not recognizing that their employees are making the sacrifice to go work on the day that that organization is probably making the most money of any other day throughout the year. So small businesses who understand how they fit into the part and parcel of their communities are often already doing this because they know of the impact. Getting the largest retailers in the state of California to follow suit and recognize those impacts, I think, is a very good thing, and I ask for your support of this bill.
Mr. Chavez, you are recognized.
Well, members, I appreciate the discussion here on both sides of it, and I imagine this is going to pass because it's going to go down party lines. But I would just like to highlight one point that one of our members made, that the market would adjust. The market will adjust. They're going to be open. Permission to use a prop?
Without objection.
I have a picture here. It's on my little iPad. I took it when I was in San Francisco. What it is, it's a Panera bread. And that Panera bread, when you go in there in San Francisco, you don't see a person, you have an iPad, a computer. And you push in what you want to eat, and then after you finish it and slide your credit card through, you sit down and you take these little things, these little buzzers, and you put it on your table. And at every table in Panera Bread in San Francisco, there's a computer link so that your food is brought to you right there, because this little box you took communicates to the people where you're sitting to bring you your food. Essentially, there were no people at all except the individual who brought me my food. Now, there was a busy day in San Francisco. There were probably 50, 60 people there eating at Panera Bread. And that all I saw working there was probably about 3 or 4 people running food out to these little boxes. If you go to Panera Bread in San Diego, there's all types of young people working there. They welcome you, they talk to you, they order your food. There's all the interaction, and you give them money or a credit card and you sit down. Why are there no people in the San Francisco Panera Bread? Because the market adjusted. That's what's going to happen. For good intention of this bill, on Thanksgiving Day,
Mr. Holden,
essentially what you're going to do is going to let the market adjust in a way.
Mr. Holden, I'm sorry, Mr. Holden, state your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, in an attempt to be patient and allow for free discussion on this issue, but I think that in this particular instance, we have to remind the Speaker that he is completely outside of the context of this bill, which is a Thanksgiving Day double pay bill, and the focus of the comment should be in relationship to the merits of the bill that's before us.
Speaking to you on Thanksgiving on the double pay for
Mr. Holden, point well taken, Mr. Chavez.
I'm going right to Thanksgiving. Right on Thanksgiving, what's going to happen, as stated by a number of members here, which Mr. Holden had no problem talking about, the market will adjust. What we're going to ensure is that people on Thanksgiving Day, they're going to open, but we're not going to have as many people as we want, and who's going to be hurting are the people that need these jobs. The market will adjust. Technology will come in. They will still be open for Thanksgiving days, and these larger companies will have the economic means to replace people with technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. All debate having ceased, Ms. Gonzalez, you may close.
Thank you. I want to bring this back to what this bill is about. Quite frankly, it's about morals. It's about our values as a legislature. It's about what is happening every holiday and growing. This isn't about a teenager working at a store for minimum wage. A lot of those days are gone. Most of the people working in these stores aren't teenagers. Most of them are women. Many of them are the bread earners in their family. This is a day by which we have said as a country should be a holiday, a day for family. And yet, every single Thanksgiving, we see more and more retailers opening up and requiring, at the threat of losing your job, to show up to work. I was raised by a single mom, and I spent some Thanksgivings without her. She was a nurse, and she'd get called in sometimes. And it was difficult. I had the rest of my family there. But the one thing we always knew is that my mother would be making double or triple time. And because of that, we'd have a little happier of a Christmas. It's hard to be home at Thanksgiving without your parents. That's happening in many of our communities. And it's happening without the benefit of knowing that there might be a toy under the tree at Christmas because of it. This is about values. This is about what we believe in. And quite frankly, by narrowing this bill, it is about taking one sector that has had a standard for half a century, that said you either close down on this holiday or you open up and pay your workers 2 or 3 times. By the way, the union grocery stores are not being outsourced, and in fact, they're still paying 3 times to their workers in Southern California who come in on Thanksgiving, and their profits are doing just fine. I can do an economic analysis. It's called the stock market. With all due respect, not everybody in this legislature and not everybody in my community had the benefit of being the son of a union painter and proclaiming that if you just work hard, you can get yourself out of minimum wage jobs. But people who work hard, who are trying to raise their families, have the right to have a little family time or at least be compensated fairly when they go to work on Thanksgiving. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. With that, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Gonzalez moves a call. File items 18 and 19 pass and retain. Members, we're moving to file item number 20. That's AB 268. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 268 by Assemblymember DeBobney, an act relating to lending.
Members, please give Mr. DeBobney some room. Mr. DeBobney, you may open on the measure.
Speakers and members, existing law allows the Commissioner of the Department of Business Oversight to examine a financial lender as deemed appropriate, but does not require consistent exam schedules. AB 268 specifies that a licensee under the California Finance Lenders Law must be examined by the DBO at least once every 48 months. This bill arises out of stakeholder meetings I began last year to examine the California Finance Lenders Law and is part of a series of changes I'm reviewing to reform and update the CFL. This bill sets a routine exam schedule for licensees and is similar to the authority that exists under other licensee laws administered by the DBO. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. DeBobney. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 67, noes 0. Measure passes.